This podcast is a 98 Studios production.
Today's the day, baby.
Today's the day.
Today's the day.
Today's the motherfucking day.
Today is the day.
Today's the day.
Today is the day.
Today's the day.
What up, everybody? Welcome back to Today's the Day with Zack Anderson. Today, I'm excited. This is going to be a really fun one for me. I can already tell from our conversations prior to recording. Today we have Mr. Ryan Napierski here. Ryan, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And all, bro.
Dude, I was gonna bedazzle it, or bejewel it, for you guys, but I didn't.
You should have.
Yeah, I'm going to. Let's do take two.
Okay, we'll do a second episode before you get it off. We'll bedazzle the neck brace.
That's it.
Dude, thank you for being here. I know you're busy. I know it's crazy, and your friends were like die hard that I had to get you out here. Dusty and Joe both die hard. So I'm really excited. And then since I started telling people I was going to have you on, a lot of people that I know you and think very, very highly of you. So I'm super excited about it.
So you talk to my kids, you talk to my parents.
Yep, exactly. Little do you know, I've got in this little notebook, I know every single thing about you.
Cool. Cool. Let's get into it.
Let's do it. But Ryan, dude, I have a ton of questions for you, but with the podcast, I think the most important thing is for people being able to know kind of who's talking to them, so on and so forth. Yeah. Right now, you're the acting CEO of New Skin, correct? Yep. Which is incredible. That's crazy, and I'm sure we'll get into that in depth. But rewind a little bit and fill us in. Like, who is Ryan? Where are you from? What was growing up like? Give us your story to get us to where you're at right now.
Yeah, well, my story. By the way, love being on here. You guys are awesome. I told you earlier, like just having a group of guys that are wanting to make the world better, to me is how life and progress happens. So I love that you're doing this. So love being here. Listen, my story is I grew up literally stone's throw from here. I grew up across the little ravine there in Orem, Utah, my parents moved. My dad was from Boston Catholic. My mom was from California. They moved, my dad moved to Walnut Creek, started dating my mom. She was 13, he was 18. Different time. Different time. No. I think that's catch a case now, but back then it wasn't. And they got together and, she kind of converted him to kind of LDS church and they decided they wanted to have a huge family. That was my mom's big aspiration. She had one sister who was 8 years younger than her and never had that family unit. And she really wanted her. Dad was a traveling salesman. Mom was a socialite, so she didn't have that. So that was her ambition. So she moved. They wanted to move to a place. And at the time it was like, hey, let's move to the hills of Utah because Sound of Music, big families, whatever. Yep. And so that was it. And they started having kids. My older brother and sister were born in California. And then they moved here. And I was always embarrassed to say I was from Utah for some reason. I was like, because then people are like, are you Mormon? And I was like, yeah, but I'm with 8 kids at Disneyland all wearing the same stuff. We got harassed all the time, right?
Yeah, 1,000%.
But, came here. Grew up pretty poor. My dad was a hard-working guy. He was kind of that philosophy, that stoic philosophy of you're called to do life's work, so just put your head down and do it. Yep. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that was his approach to things. And just taught us to work hard. At 8 years old, we needed money as a family, and so he started the Tom and Sons landscaping business, which was my older brother, who was 9, myself, and he would just drop us off every day from April until October to mow lawns, and he would go get deals, right? Like we mowed our dentist's lawn. They're all out swimming all summer. The dentists, and imagine like an 8 and 9-year-old like sweating away while the 16-year-old girl in the bikinis like laughing, and we think she's laughing at us because we're these poor kids working while they're doing that.
They're swimming.
So while they're swimming, and so he did that. We did that. He taught us to work hard.
Such a blessing in disguise. Though.
Huge blessing. Hugely humbling and huge blessing. In fact, I've learned more from jobs I don't want to do and the work that I said I would never do again. That kind of propelled me to where I am now. Yep. But so we worked hard. We worked all summer, which didn't leave. We had no money. In fact, I was talking to somebody the other day. I said, I only went to that I recall 2 movies growing up. One was Pete's Dragon. My brother found $5 at the mall, and he took the whole family to Pete's Dragon at the
awesome.
Sarah Theater.
That was the theater. They had the dollar movie
that
on
was
Mondays.
It, man. Yep. And we did that. And then the second one was Top Gun in 1984. My dad and mom went on a date. My dad, it was the only time my dad just got lit up. He comes home and he's like, guys, I have to take you, the boys. I'm taking you to Top Gun. And I just was like, what? And my mom's like, so he literally turned around, put us in the car, and we went and saw the late version of Top Gun. Yeah, with my mom. And I remember my mom, before walking out, she had this lecture, because there's a scene there where Tom Cruise and I forget the lady, they're like kissing with their tongues.
Yeah.
and
your mom's like, no.
Like, no, you guys know, you just have to remember, this is a very adult stuff. You're going to see, and it doesn't make any sense. And I just remember sitting there watching it going like, what are they doing? Like, they're licking each other with their, so anyways, but that was it, right? We ate it out at McDonald's.
That's Utah right there.
That was it.
That's
man.
Utah right there.
It was. And so, doing that, I think we ate out at McDonald's maybe 5 times. We just didn't have any money. We had a motor home because we couldn't afford to fly. My parents bought kind of an old motor home, and we'd take 1 week a year, and we'd just drive to California to stay at my grandparents or my cousins. That was it. We didn't go anywhere else. And we'd go there. In fact, I have this vivid memory, and sorry, we're going a little deep on childhood, but
I love it.
I remember driving through, and I have this memory, and I asked my dad like 10 years ago, I'm like, Dad, why do I have a memory of sleeping on a roll of carpet in a strip mall? Like what is that? And he's like, you know what? It's Uncle Walt did carpets, and we needed a place to stay. We couldn't afford any motels or whatever.
Yeah.
And by that time, we were too big. We had 8 kids, 10 people. And so we couldn't sleep in the motorhome, or some of us couldn't.
Yeah.
And so we pulled up to a strip mall, and the older ones, we went and slept on
you guys
literal,
just
like,
rock, paper, scissors for having
carpet.
to go sleep on the carpet.
And we just rolled on the carpet. And I remember laying there. I just remember trying to fall asleep on this strip mall, this giant roll of carpet. But that was growing up. Like, we didn't have money. And you know what? It was a huge blessing, because from 8, we mowed lawns. And I remember at 14, my brother was 15, and we started to think like, wait a sec. No, we were making good money. We were making $100 a month by the time we were 15. When we started, we were making 20 a month.
Yeah.
But by the time we were making like $100, and like in 1984,
that's cash.
That was cash. Like, it was enough to go to a movie, buy a, what was the guy with the claw? Freddy Krueger. Dude, I spent $30 at an arcade. I bought a $20 Freddy Krueger claw, and I took all my friends to a movie on one paycheck. Like, it was like, you could do so much with $100. Yeah. And then I was out of money for the rest of the month. Yeah. But at one point, my brother Cade comes home, and he goes, dude, I think Dad's been skimming money off of us. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, think about it. He pays us $100 each, $200. And he said, and I just saw the check for one job was $490. So on that alone, he was skimming $290, and we had like 6 jobs. So at one point, I'm like, this is bull crap, right? So I go to my dad, Cade, and we approach him because we're driving out. He'd always take us out in this old 68 Chevy truck, and he would drop us off, and then he would go on to work. He wasn't like playing. He would go and he would go do his day job. And you guys
were 14 and 16 at this point?
At this point, 14, 15. So, we weren't legally
but you're
old
getting
enough.
Up there to be a little bit.
But we're like watching it, and he goes, and so we're driving out, and he always stopped at Circle K, and we would get a donut, like and we always got the biggest donut you could, right? Because it's like he's buying. Yeah. So we'd always get the apple fritter. We both hated apple fritters, but it was the biggest donut. Yeah. So we buy these, and so we're sitting in the car, and we're like, Dad, so we saw the job for Sounds Easy Pizza, the strip mall, next to Purple Turtle, and it was $490. And he said, boys, you just learned the lesson. I fronted the capital for these lawnmowers, so I'm making money off you. And we were like, dude, like, we were asking, could you give us more of the cut? And he was just saying, you guys are suckers, right? Like, I put the money in. And but it was at that point that I was like, oh, I'm done. Like, I'm done working for my dad. What I didn't realize at the time is we were putting food on the table for our whole family. But he said, listen, if you can find another job, and he had a whole like trump of kids, right? So he was just going to pull our next siblings up, and they were going to be the sweaters. So that's
your dad is a legend.
That's what he always. Yeah, he just ran Tom and Sons, man. He just ran it. But at that point, I started, and I went out and found the best job I could, which was at Tank's Car Wash, working with a bunch of 18-year-old women that were into like smoking weed, which was a totally different experience. Yeah. And did that until I was old enough to get another job at the Sounds Easy Pizza place with my brother Cade. Went on, got into retail clothes and got into sales, but at a retail level when I was 16, and did that until 19 years old. Went over, did a mission in Korea for my church, which, by the way, I always say, sales is a critical skill to have, right?
Yep.
There's nothing harder to sell than religion, like
I believe
especially in a Buddhist country, where everyone's like, "Who?" But you learn how to sell, right? And you learn how to get the door opened. And so I did that for 2 years. Came back, and then I was like, I'm not going to school. My dad never went to school. I had a grandpa that did an associate's degree, which was like a 2-year degree to get into sales, and he was like the smart one of the family. But I was like, what am I going to do like with my life, right? I don't want to do it. So I went back into retail, and I was like, I'm not making enough money. Some of the guys I knew were like, hey, you should go to school and get a degree. And I'm like, I don't want to. I wasn't smart. I've never been good at anything. I was just like very average at everything.
Yeah.
But I'm like, okay, so I enroll at the community college, worked full time, worked nights, went to the gym when I could. And then just went to school, and I did that for like 5 years, undergrad school. My last year in school, I was sitting there selling. I was still working and selling. And a guy comes in. Sorry, it wasn't my last year. It was my third year. And he comes in, and I get talking to this guy, and he's dressed like, so I've always been into clothes, right? But this guy's dressed like really well. And he comes in, and we start talking. It was called 39 West. It had like Ralph Lauren. At the time, these were like the big brands, like Ralph Lauren. And I'm selling him, and I'm trying to sell him on these suits. And he didn't want suits, but I noticed his shoes. And I'm like, I noticed you have shoes on. You got to come check our shoe line out. And he's like, yeah, cool. So we go. So we just start talking. And by the end of it, I had sold him 6 pair of shoes, right? So I had, and these were like $100 pair of shoes at the time, which was big. Yeah. Like you could buy a Freddy Krueger claw with it,
Facts.
But,
yeah.
And so I sold him. And so we're checking him. I'm checking him out. And he's like, hey man, like have you ever thought of getting into sales? You should get into sales. And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, I do retail. And he's like, no, I'm talking like corporate sales. Yeah. He's like, why don't you come down to my office and check it out? And I was like, okay, like where? And he's like, New Skin. Like, I was like, I don't know. He's go, you know that Darth Vader building in Provo, that giant dark tower? Yeah. I'm like, yeah. He's like, I'm on the top floor. Come down and see me. And so I was like, okay, cool. So I like went down, saw him, talked to him about it. He toured me. It was really cool because he was, he's 20, 25 years older than me, tours me around. Yeah. And I'm like, this is the first time I had ever been in a corporate environment. Like Utah had no corporations. Like New Skin by far was the biggest company at the time. Yeah. And I'm touring around this thing, no idea. Like I had never been, nobody in my family had been in corporate environments. Never been in schools, like really case studies weren't a thing back then at a community college. But I'm walking through this thing and I'm like, I love the idea of riding to the top of the elevator and thinking everyone else is working for this guy, right? And he was running our Americas region at the time.
Who was it there?
His name's Scott Schwartz. He passed away just a bit ago. Got it. In fact, I'll tell that if I know we got time limitations, but it's a cool story with Scott. And he was a lifetime mentor for me, which I know you're big into mentors. Yep. So Scott's like, Ryan, like he introduces me, takes me down the floor, introduces me to people. And he's like, I was like, well, how could I get a job there? He's like, well, you got to call the phone line because this is pre-internet, right? Yep. Well, not pre-internet, but pre kind of like website stuff. Yep. So I'm like calling the hotline, constantly, and I find this job, and it's like, well, you got to have a 4-year degree, you got to do this, but if you speak Korean and if you have sales experience and you have a 4-year degree, you can do this job, right?
You're like,
so I
perfect.
go, so I'm like, I got 2 out of 3. Yeah. And by the way, the degree will come in 2 years, so why not do it? So I apply. They reject me, so I call in and I'm like, hey, could I talk to the person that rejected me? His name was Ben Mongole. And he was the team leader of the sales team. And so I called Ben and I'm like, I said, sir, what could you just tell me what I need to do better to get this job? And he's like, no, you did a great job. You just don't have a college degree. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm working on it and I'll have one in another year and a half or so. Yeah. And he's like, yeah, but it requires a college degree. And I was like, okay, but why? Like why does a college degree matter? He's like, all he could get to is, well, that's kind of how we screen people. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, but like, if I'm good at sales, and so he was just like, yeah, whatever. And he's like, okay. So I was just like, shoot, I go home and I'm like, okay, so that doesn't work. And then I call in and again, and they hadn't filled like same position. So I applied again. So I show up and he interviews and he's like, okay, like, yeah, we're not doing this. And I was like, but
he's like,
I'm
I
here.
already told you no.
So, yeah. So the dude, so he rejects me 3 times, right? So I did it
Shut
again.
up.
The 3rd time I applied, I go back in. And at that point, he's like, I needed to tell you to stop applying. Like, apply again in 18 months. Like, you'll do awesome.
Yeah.
And I was like, that really sucks. And so I left. And I was pretty deflated. And like a day later, he calls and he goes, hey, can you come see me? I was like, yeah. So I go back in and he's like, so we offered the job to this other guy. His name was Eric. I don't know why I remember that. And he accepted and he just rejected it. And so we need somebody that speaks Korean because we're opening the market in a year. And I was like, yeah, like I'm here. Like, let's go.
Yeah.
And so they put me in place of this guy. And I started there. And
I think that's actually so important though.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm actually curious. I don't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No.
I'm curious
I
because
can talk forever, bro.
I love it. That
I'm
makes
glad
my
you got
job
me
10 times easier. I like it. No, but I have a question because like I'm listening to that and I work with a lot of 18 to 28 year olds, like a lot, that I work hand in hand with every single day. And like, I notice the certain personality traits that people just don't really have. And one of them is willingness to go be rejected.
Yeah.
So like a lot of people are too scared to get rejected. They don't even try.
Yeah.
And then you got rejected and then you kept doing it.
Yeah.
And my question for you is, sorry, it's a long question. My question for you is where did you get that, you specifically in your life, to go be like, oh dude, I want it. So I'm first going to go try it. Who cares if they say no? And then if they said no, I'm going to go literally reapply, or first off, I'm going to call back and ask why I got denied.
Right.
And then I'm going to go back and apply with the same person for the same job in the same circumstances to get denied again. Because, I mean, Tony Robbins says that like our greatest fear, human beings' greatest fear is to go be rejected. Like that's like the number one, like most innate fear.
Yeah.
What, and you were how old at that point too? You were
I was 21, 22
years old.
Yeah.
So is it like, where do you think that came from?
No. Well, yeah, no. I mean, first of all, what I would say is, I think a lot of people lack that, but I think a lot of people have always lacked that. And I think there's always people that are willing to put themselves out there. I mean, you guys doing this podcast, right? I mean, it takes something to do something, right?
Yeah.
For me, it's funny. So I'll answer the question, but I'm sitting there a couple of months ago, right? And I was reading a really toxic post. I was actually at the mall getting some pants hemmed, of all things, right? Because they were like way too long for me. And I'm sitting there waiting for the Too Tiny Taylor, this Korean dude. Yep. And he's a cool guy, right? So we're talking
University Mall.
Yeah, a little bit of Korean, right? And I'm sitting there and I'm reading this post while he's doing measurements. I'm like, this is such, and I don't use the term toxic, but it was a little bit of that toxic masculinity. And by the way, there's a lot of toxic femininity, so I'm not going to get into that. But I was sitting there reading this, and I'm kind of going down like why does this bother me? Like if something bothers you, you have to look inside and think, why is this bothering me?
Yeah.
And what I realized is I've never put myself out there like he was. And so as much as I felt like it was kind of toxic, his message, he was putting himself out there. And I was like, Ryan, you've never done that. And that takes courage, right? So I went home and I this was the weirdest thing. It was a Saturday, about 5:30. I start on my iPad. I said, you know what? I'm gonna write my story. I'm gonna be 100% vulnerable and honest with myself. And I've never done that before.
Yeah.
So this is just a few months ago.
Yeah.
So I start just typing. 2:30 in the morning. I'm not kidding you. I wrote for 7 hours.
Shut up.
I wrote for 7 hours, and then I went to sleep, and then I woke up about 6 Sunday morning. So I was only asleep for a few hours. Wake up and I start typing again, and I go all day on this thing. And the whole thing was, I wanted to capture like who I am from a vulnerable point. By the way, I just turned 50.
Yeah.
So there's something that happens when you turn 50. Like there's something where my life's half over.
Yep.
Like I've always said, I'm going to live to 100 and then I'm going to die in a parachute. Like I'm literally, my friends will push me out. They'll pack a lunch instead of the actual chute. And they'll just be like, dude, pull this string. And then I'll pull it and there will be nothing there. And that's that. So I'm going to live 100 years. At 50, it's half over, right?
Yep.
So I wanted to capture this. So I start writing, and the chapter I didn't want to write was not enough. And I have always had this feeling inside of me that I'm not enough.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this deep rooted, and I don't know where it came from. Like my name is Ryan. Like my mother growing up, I was the most like loved kid ever, right?
Yeah.
And like I remember her pulling me aside one day and she's like, Ryan, you know what Ryan means, don't you? And I was like, no. And she's like, little prince. So you want to talk about like, you know.
Yeah.
But I've never felt like I'm enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at that and I'm like, I don't know where that comes from. And maybe it's a lot of people, but that's been the fuel for me that's always been there. It's like, I'm not enough. And I remember the flip side of it is my dad, again, he worked hard, but I always hear the expression, so do washing machines, right?
Yeah.
They were real hard. With my dad, it was always, he never was willing to put himself out there to make more money for the family, to achieve the ambition he has, to build a better life for himself. He just kind of, like I said, he had that philosophy, which I think was common in the 50s, 60s, 70s, just do your job, right?
Hit the grindstone.
Just do it. But it always bothered me. And I remember later in high school, he had to move away because his employer, and he wasn't an attorney, like he wasn't this high corporate guy. He literally did optical, like fit glasses on your face at a mall, right? Yeah. And they told him he had a non-compete. Like if he was going to go, so he had an opportunity to go partner and start his own optical shop, own his own thing. Instead of making, the most he ever made growing up was $26,000 a year for 10 people in the family. Like even in the 70s, that's not a lot of money.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And I remember hearing that and I was like, I told somebody one day in high school, I was like, yeah, no, Dad does okay. You know, he's not bad. I was make $26,000 a year. And the buddy I told, his dad was one of the founders of WordPerfect, right? Which was
so, good buddy to choose.
So it kind of blew up, right? But it was this. But I realized for me where this blew up was, and this kind of this incessant, not enough ambition, in part came from seeing my dad never putting himself out there for the betterment of his family, for the better. Now, again, he provided, and I will never, it sounds like I'm disparaging. The dude worked hard and he gave me everything, including just having a father and an upbringing. But it was that notion that he wouldn't go claim his stake that's always caused me.
You felt like disappointment that he wasn't hitting his potential and like he wasn't.
Yeah. Or that even more than that, maybe it was more selfish. It wasn't his potential. It was selfish as a kid, right? Because we all look at our lens. I was like, bro, like I'm sleeping on a roll of carpet, right? Like I'm in hand-me-down jeans. Like my mother, bless her heart, like had to go back to work. The one thing she ever wanted to be was a mother, a stay-at-home mom. She had to go back to work when we had more kids because they were getting older. We needed stuff. And I remember my mom coming home one day. She never wanted us to feel less than. And so she went out and she bought me an $80 necktie, which doesn't sound like a ton, but in the 80s, for a family that had no money, an $80 necktie was for a dance. Yeah. It was for a dance. And so she wanted me, and I had this, like, my eye on this girl who was 2 years older. By the way, like, I always had my eye on, like, these older girls. She was a senior, I was a sophomore. And so she bought me this tie so that I would have the courage to go ask her out.
That's awesome.
And so my whole thing, my point, my answer to you is what's fueled me throughout my entire life is this never enough, not enough mindset that I wrote down in that final chapter in my book, or not my book, my memoirs. I just want to capture that.
Yeah.
But it was the final chapter I had to go back and write because I
didn't want to.
I didn't want to write that. Yeah.
That's so interesting. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So literally on that then, and I don't mean to go further into the rabbit hole, you were sparked to go write down your whole story because of a post you saw that bothered you, and you reflected inward. You're like, why does that bother me? It's like, oh, he's putting himself out there. I've never done that. I'm going to go do that.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
What did you do with that? You just write it?
It's just in my iPad, man. Like someday when somebody dies, I just looked it up this morning. I have 14,752 notes in my iPad, right? Like on Apple Notes.
Yeah.
Including stuff I don't want anyone to ever see.
Yeah.
But including that, which is, if I printed it out, it's probably 80, 100 pages. I don't know.
That is crazy.
But I just want to do that. And what I decided is I'm just going, because I've never been a journaler. Like Jesse Itzler, like Jesse's big into journaling. A lot of people, they always talk about it.
Yeah.
I've never done it. And so I wanted to capture something that also, I have 3 kids, like that they can learn from.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'll do anything with it other than maybe at some point give them access to it.
That's what I was going to say. You know how valuable that would be to them to be able to go read through that?
Yeah.
That'd be so cool.
Yeah, there's stuff in it I'm not sure. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like it's the vulnerability, but it's like that not enough principle.
Yep.
Like, but what I will say is writing it down has given me courage to talk about it.
Yeah.
And what's funny, I always tell my son Cole, he's like this amazing kid, right? Like he's 21, amazing kid. And I never realized this, but I think he's compared himself to me, and we're vastly different people.
Yeah.
Right. He's so much better than me in so many ways. Professionally, I'm more successful than him because he's 21. Right.
Yeah.
And we always talk about this because now he's bigger than me. He's starting to work out more, so he's probably stronger than me. And I'm like, bro, you can never beat me though, because I made you, right?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter. Like you could smash my head into the ground and I will be proud of you because I made you. Like you can never beat me.
Yeah, you can't win.
But when I'm talking with him, like I feel like there's this hole with my kids. There's this thing about parenting that you never, especially when I was younger, like I didn't want them to know that I was fallible, that I was false, that I was imperfect. And I remember being so pissed. My mom one day, she's telling me, because I was never good at anything, but I like to build an image of what I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to play football, but we didn't have money to play football. So we never did Pee Wee leagues. We never did any of that. But so finally 9th grade, I'm making my own money. And I'm like, I'm going to go try out for the football team. And so I'm like, I go try out for it. And I really wanted to play badly. And I just hadn't played growing up. And so other than in the neighborhood on like street ball, where I was always Tony Dorsett, my brother was Roger Staubach, right? I mean, turns out I'm not genetically built like Tony Dorsett, but then I go try out for this football, the team, the high school team, and I just get like walked on like constantly. But I finally kind of found my place, outside linebacker. I was slow enough. I was fast enough to be there, but too slow to be backfield. I was small enough, but I wasn't big enough to be line. Small enough, but I was bigger than. So I was like, this outside linebacker was perfect position. And my mother, so my mom she was so proud of me, right? My dad never came to any of the games. My mom would come, and she made a comment to my kids one day, and she goes, I could always find Ryan on the field because his socks were so white, meaning I never played, right? And I was so upset with her. My kids were like 8 years old at the time, right? They were young. And
but you didn't want them
Savannah,
to
Cole, and Ava.
Yep.
Savvy's 25 now, Cole's 21. Savvy's turning 5, Cole's turning 21, and Ava's just turned 18. So they're like 3 years apart. So yeah, Sav was probably like 11, 12, Cole's 8. I just remember Cole was 8. And I'm like, I was so upset that my mom told them that. Like, because I wanted them to think I was perfect.
You were the all-star.
Like, yeah, I was like great at everything. I was the all-star. What it was really is my own ego, right?
Yep.
But what I found is that's such a disservice to our kids to not show them that, yeah, my socks were white because I didn't play.
Yeah.
It didn't mean I didn't work hard. What I should have focused on is hey, you work hard even though you don't get to play, right?
Yep.
That's the lesson. But I didn't learn that until too late. Not too late. Like I'm learning it now.
Yeah.
Now that my kids are. But if I would have learned that when Cole was 8,
Yeah.
and then for 12 years, he would have seen, man, my dad, he was never enough, not enough, never good enough, average. But look at him now, right?
Yep.
Because he's been persistent.
Yeah.
Like most people just give up. Most people give up. Like it's not, they always say child prodigies. By the time they're 34, they get lapped. They get lapsed, right? So they graduate 8 years old, they go to Cornell, they become a medical doctor, Doogie Howser, right? And then by 34, their peers lap them, and they don't understand. There's a big study on this that Charles Duhigg has done, and he talks about it's the power of habits. He talks about this idea of like, why do child prodigies that are these amazing, like, and you can think about that in like top athletes in high school, like most of them don't go on, right? Or Tom Brady, not great, and all of a sudden greatest quarterback of all time. What was it, right? It was persistence to beat average. And most people are just the opposite. They stop doing the work. And so what I've learned over time is the more persistent you are at beating average, beating average, your average, most of the time that's going to win over time.
100%. Right? And that also takes patience too. Like a lot of people, they do all the right things and they beat their average for a certain amount of time, but if they don't get the results they want in doing that in however long, then they quit. I agree with that 1,000%. I think it's awesome. And I also think you said something that's really, really powerful as well. It's like, and like learning that I think is so important for a lot of parents, especially successful parents. Because I have a lot of friends that have their parents that do these crazy things, that are presidents of these multi-billion-dollar companies or whatever it may be. And they have like a disconnect. And the disconnect comes from they just don't relate. And I think that's partially because a lot of parents don't want to go and be vulnerable enough to be like, no, like I was a dumbass in high school too. Like I got into dumb stuff too. I did that too. I failed there. And like even in ways that like the things that you typically think as a parent would make you look bad just make people younger people relate with you way more, because then they can be like, oh dude, no way, we might have like hung out in high school, rather than like, dude, you're a prick, like I don't you know what I'm saying?
100%.
It's the strangest thing ever. And like I've also been super lucky to see, I think Todd Peterson does a really good job with not only his kids but with all of us when we'd go over there of like relating. Like I felt like, oh dude, if he was my age, we would have hung out 1,000%. And then that just helps younger generation think way bigger. They're like, dude, if that guy can go and get there, I could do something like that too. It's super cool.
He's one. I mean, you've had so many good people on the podcast, and Todd is one of those. Like actually a lot of the guys you just mentioned are those guys, right? And there's something about relatability. I mean, we're human at the end of the day, right? We're not freaking bears that go hibernate. We we are social animals. And I think that's so important. But I just feel like we're all conditioned to for whatever reason to hide the scars and the wounds, when in fact we should be celebrating scars and wounds.
I agree 1,000%. I like, this is a little bit off topic, but it goes along with it. One of my reps was interviewing me just a couple months ago. And I've been super lucky. Like I've been super lucky to be in rooms with people, and I think I owe 90% of everything I've done to the people that kind of took me under their wing and were willing to give me like you, like people like you willing to come and talk to me is like, I owe most of my success to it. So one of my reps was interviewing me, and they're like, hey, like, what did you learn about these guys? And he listed like 5 of the guys that are like the best to ever do it in our industry, like the Todds, Casey's, Bodie's. Like, what did you learn about them? Like, what's the it factor? And I'm like, honestly, what I learned hanging out with them that actually was like powerful and like resonated with me was, there is no it factor. Like that's what I learned is like Casey is just as flawed as everyone else.
For sure.
Todd is just as flawed as everyone else, and all these guys. And that's like, it's becoming a super, super common trend as I have people on here. And luckily we've had really, really cool guests. We've only had a couple people come on here that pretend, that still try and hide like all their faults. And I'm not going to say who, but like very, very rarely when someone's truly successful, do they still try and do that. It's really strange. It's really, really cool. And I love it.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I think, you know, we always talk about like authenticity, right? Cause I mean, but it's such it's such a thing. Like it's like, if not the most important characteristic somebody can have is to be truly authentic to themselves. And I'll be honest, like I'm still learning how to do that. Like,
yeah, for sure.
There's so many things in my life that for years, like for instance, like I've been separated from my wife for 7 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, separated? Like, why aren't you just divorced? I'm like, I don't fall into the stereotype, first of all. I hate the term. I hate the perception that you can build a life with somebody for 20, have amazing kids, and all of a sudden you're supposed to divorce and become enemies. Like I don't get that, right? But for years I tried to hide that, right? So I'm like moving back into my neighborhood where we were married, and I'm living on my own now, right? And it's like, well, and I'm thinking, well, what did he do wrong? Like, well, he screwed up, because I always wanted to be perfect, right? Yep. My whole thing, like hide the white socks, right? It was like, and then what I've found is like, number one, like I judge myself far harder than anyone else is judging me.
Yep.
Number two, I relate more to people when they know that I got my own stuff.
Yep.
And I think number three, we all have relationship issues. Like the happiest relationships in the world go through hard times.
Yep.
And so I look at it and I'm like, man, there's so many lessons I learned through like Dalai Lama Joe. So Joe gave me a book. So when this was all falling apart, like, and this is a whole different episode we could talk about. It's a fascinating story of like what not to do in life when you're pursuing success. And then anyways, so a different episode, but I'm like, I came back because we lived in Japan for 10 years. Right. And I'm like, dude, my life's falling apart. Like it looks on the outside, everyone thought I had this amazing life. On the inside, it was crumbling. Like every part of me was crumbling. And I'm like, what? And when one thing, like for people in pursuit of perfection, when the first crack happens,
just spirals.
Those cracks just go everywhere, right? They go into spirituality. And I was, and I was fearful, like professional, family, like everything, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, and Joe, he's a good friend, Joe Morton. He's like, he gives me this book. And that's when I first started getting into learn. So I read a couple books a month now. Like I'm just incessant about it. Like Casey's big into books. Joe's big into books. Like that's a huge, to me, like learnability quotient is probably the most important thing to create long-term success. Yeah. But so Joe gives me this book. He's like, Ryan, you need to read this. And we kind of exchanged books. I had this book called The Power of Now. Yep. He had a book called The Art of Happiness, because he knew I wasn't happy. This was the Dalai Lama book, right? Yep. And I'm reading through this thing, and I'm like, what am I supposed to learn from this whole book, right? There's like 400 pages in it. There's one line in the entire book. Well, there's a ton of lines that resonated for me at that time. Yeah. And the line was, relationships never die. They only evolve. Like relationships never die. They only evolve. Even if you hate somebody, you still have a relationship with them.
Mm. Like it's just an evolution of what it was.
It's an evolution. And so because they never die, you better cherish every relationship in your life. You better hold that. Even if, like, so in this case, right, Jen, like we're nurturing 7 years later, a stronger and stronger friendship, a stronger and stronger family ship than we had, frankly, at times when we were all together under one roof. Yeah. And I remember seeing this marriage counselor, and she and I just got into it because I'm like Jen and I started going together. Mm-hmm. And then it was kind of like, okay, this isn't like working. Yeah. And so then I'm like, hey, let's try a new one. And Jen was like, listen, I know what I have. Like, you got to go work out your issues. And I'm like, okay. So I go find this therapist, and I'm like, I'm going to get a female therapist, because then she can tell me really what I'm doing wrong. Yeah. And I sit down with this, and the first thing she says is, she's like, she listens to my story, and she's like, so when did your family fall apart? And I'm like, well, no, I still have a family. I mean, we just have issues. And she's like, no, when did it fall apart? And I'm like, no, it didn't fall apart. Like we still have issues. Like we're still together. We still support. I support her. I support her financially. I support. She was going back to school. We're co-parenting. Like, no, we're still a family. She's like, no, you're not. And we get in this huge back and forth. And I left, and I'm like, I'm never going back. And in part in the reflection, I'm like, number one, and I still believe she's totally wrong. Like we're a family. Like the definition of family to me is far beyond blood.
Yep.
But when it is blood, like blood's thicker than water, like that, you never lose that.
Yep.
You can choose to leave it, but you should never lose it. Right. And so there's that part of it. But I was like, no, like and it just, when Joe gave me that book, I was like that line. And I've thought of that line thousands of times, and it's helped me in every aspect of my life to think relationships never die. They only evolve. And so you can build again, professionally, personally, with your children. Like, you never give up on your kids. Like, never. I don't care how stupid they are. And my kids have done dumb things. I did dumb things. My mother never gave up on me. Yeah. Like all the way up to her death, she always thought I was the best thing ever. Right. Yeah. Through all of my mistakes, my kids have done stupid things. And like, I am the first to know, for them to know that, like, I will never give up on them.
That's
right.
Awesome.
And you just have to, like, to me, take that into every aspect of even people you don't like.
Yep.
Personally, like, you just don't get along with them. I've found through life, like, there are personalities where I just meet and I'm like, man, that dude's weird. Like could I be, there's always something to learn from every person, and just realizing that value and just keeping to it. I think that relationships they never die. They only evolve.
That's really cool. Lesson. I've read that book and I didn't get that out of it at all.
Yeah. Because you didn't need that at the time.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I've learned that with a ton of books, but I actually love that. Like, I think that is so gold, because if you think, I think that's so powerful, because if you think that relationships die, and what that could look like is like, oh, if you have a falling out, the relationship's dead. Yeah. So you stop putting any effort into it.
That's right. Yeah.
But if you understand, no, it doesn't die, it just evolves. You can go and get it back to where it was, or get it way better than it was, even if you have something that could seem like it's like relationship ending. That's really cool.
And that's karma, by the way, right?
Yeah.
It's a principle that Western Judeo-Christian society does. It's captured in the notion of, like, love your neighbor, right?
Yep.
But it's Eastern philosophies are so much deeper on karma.
Yeah.
Because those spiritual practices, and I will say they're more spiritual than religions, defined religions. But the spiritual practice around karma, like what goes around comes around. The way you treat people is, it's a truism.
Yep.
That's eternal, right? Yeah. Like, in every way.
100%.
Like this universe is based on the reciprocity of gravity, right? It's part of who we are. So I just think that karma, the karmic nature of human connection, and that idea of approaching everything that has value and finding the value and keeping the value is what builds that along. Yeah. Like, when we think about, like, so I'm sitting here, right, with this freaking neck brace and it's choking me. I feel like I've got this small person and they've got me
in a
headlock, and it's like slowly choking me out. But it's like you go through, a few weeks ago I break my neck skiing, right, and I'm with 4 guys, Joe being one, 4 others, Roger, a couple of my friends, Sam, and we're all skiing and having this amazing day. Like, we're up behind Tim, like, beautiful bluebird powder. Everything's awesome. Like, day couldn't be better. In fact, on the way skinning up, I'm like, 6 more weeks of this, guys. Like, this season, like, let's enjoy every single time up there. And then we're skiing down, and they're all better skiers than me, right? And so I'm like going through, and I see this ice field, and I'm like, this little icy run, not field, this icy run through trees, and I'm like, I'm gonna shoot this gap. Like, I can do it. They all do it. They're all, by the way, they're all phenomenal skiers, right? Like Joe's like masterful skiers. They all shoot the gap and they make it. And I'd even made it the week before. Yeah. And so I'm like, but it was a sketch. So like, I start going down, and I'm like going through this thing, and I get to this ditch that they all kind of popped out of. My skis just stabbed right in the bottom of it, and I crumble over, and I'm like, I hit the back of my head. My helmet goes on over my face, and I hear this Cheeto bag in my neck, like, just smash. Pieces floating in my neck. I can feel it. And I'm like, I broke my freaking neck, right? Yep. I literally broke my neck, and I slid out of the ditch. I just remember just sliding out and laying there. and thinking I'm paralyzed. Like not thinking, I knew I was paralyzed, because I don't know anybody that's broken their neck and not been paralyzed. I don't know anybody that's broken their neck. But I mean, you think break your neck, you're paralyzed. So I'm laying there in the snow. They're all ahead of me because they're so much better than me. And I'm just laying there. I'm paralyzed, right?
Yep.
I can't see. Turns out my helmet was over my eyes, but I can't see. And I'm laying there knowing I'm paralyzed. And I'm just like, every word's coming out of my mouth. Like I'm, please God, like, don't let it end like this.
Yep.
And when I mean end, because I need movement for my mental health.
Yep.
If I can't move, I don't know what happens next. Right.
Yep.
And then I start thinking, is this a lesson God's teaching me? And Instagram doesn't help, because I'm watching all these guys, the wheelchair dad, going through, and I'm like, I can't be that guy. Like that. I need to be moving. Like I can't be that type of guy.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, man, I hear Joe's voice. So I talk about karma, right? I'll tie that in. And Joe's sitting there, and Joe, right? Like the eternal optimist.
Yep.
And he's like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And I said, Joe, I broke my neck. I think I said broke my effing neck. And Joe doesn't, Joe doesn't swear at all. And I don't think I swear, but my kids tell me I swear a lot. And I'm like, I broke, and I'm just over and over again, I'm just telling myself that I broke it. And he's like, and he adjusts my helmet up, and I'm like, okay, wait, I can see, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm not blind, because I don't know what that would have meant. I mean, that could have meant my head was literally off my body. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then he's like, well, can you move fingers? Start to move. Like, and I was like, no, like I just can't. I can't do it. And I told you guys earlier, it was like Talladega Nights, where Will Ferrell stabs himself in the leg because he says he's paralyzed. But now I get what he was doing. Like, if your mind tells you you are, you don't want to find out that you're not.
Yeah.
Well, you want to find out that you're not, but you don't want to test it. I guess is the point. You don't want to find out,
because you don't want to know for sure.
Because you don't want to know for sure. Yep. And so the fear of just checking my fingers was a real fear.
That's so crazy.
And so, but I start moving them, and then he's like, "What about your toes?" And I start moving the toes. What about your left fingers? And I'm like, I can't move it. I can't move my left arm. And he's like, well, you're laying on it. I'm like, oh, okay. So I like roll over on my turtle back, right on my backpack.
Yep.
And I'm laying there, and I'm like, okay, I can move them. So then he's like, take your time. Joe's coaching me through this, like the eternal optimist Joe, the mind over matter type thing. And he's just walking. He's like, and eventually he's like, well, listen, we don't have cell phone coverage. We got to get out of here. But we can't call anybody. Like, can you walk? And I'm like, yeah, I think like I can move my legs. At that point, I'm moving. So he stands me up, and my neck just falls to the left, right? And I fall backwards. And I'm just like, boom, like I'm out. And I'm like, my neck's broken. So I knew my neck was broken. So anyways, they finally helped me up. We start walking down. And I'm like, this is going to take forever. We got to get to the hospital. My neck's broken. Throw the skis on, ski out. And I'm just like snow plowing down, right? To just get out. But it's faster than walking. And I'm holding my head up all the way to the car, right?
Gosh.
Joe takes me in, all that. I'm telling you guys, like, I ended up getting to the hospital, they x-ray, whatever. I broke T1, T2 on my vertebrae, strained everything, had a concussion. Strain the muscles in my neck, it's the most painful part. Actually, you don't feel the spine as much.
Yeah,
it's all the muscles and the ligaments that are torn up.
Yep.
But my reflections have been twofold on that. Number one, like, thank God for movement, like every single day, right? Is just the very fact, like when you like just laying in the snow, and it was probably only 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But thinking I'm never going to move again, not thinking, knowing I'm never going to know it, because I heard my neck break.
Yeah.
And maybe that sounds overly dramatic, but it was like so emphatically imprinted on my brain of like,
yeah, it's broken,
and therefore, but thinking that, and then number two, thinking of those guys, right?
Yeah.
That were the product of our 5 closest friends, like those guys, that were there, that got me back on my feet, that got me feeling, that got my skis on me, that took me to the hospital, sat there and answered all the questions that the doctors were asking me because I couldn't remember anything.
So crazy.
Like, having people in your life, like, and I know it's one weird thing about Utah is that friendships, maybe it's a religion thing. I don't know. It's like, I don't feel like we put as much emphasis on friendships and the karmic nature of friendships as we should. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, because you get married, right? You have kids, you have your family.
What do you mean by
units.
that? You mean people don't, in your opinion, value and like place the value on friendships that they should, and the value on those relationships is what you're saying?
I think in our community, we put far more attention, and I got to be careful how I say this.
Yeah.
Far more attention on family and on religious community and even profession than we do on friendship. And friendship's like the fourth leg of the stool.
Yeah, I could see that.
Right? Because if you don't have friends, and when I mean friends, because I have a lot of friends. I have a few really close friends. My few really close friends are the guys, we have a surf group, right? We're all different, but we all are in the similar life circumstance.
Yep.
But diverse enough that we can give each other input.
Yeah.
So whether it's Dusty, whether it's Joe, whether it's Roger, Mitch, whoever, it's like every one of these guys, we're kind of in similar state of life.
Yeah. Where
we've maybe had professional success, we have family success and challenges. We're just human.
Yep.
But I just don't, maybe the better way to say it is I really believe that in society, we need to put far more emphasis on friendship.
Yeah.
And maintaining those throughout our lives than probably maybe
yeah,
at least for me, than I did my first 35, 40 years of life.
Yeah. And I think the first step of that is being like a really good, authentic friend.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the first step of it. And I think you're absolutely right. I think you said something as well, as a lot of people put a ton of emphasis on their family, which is amazing. Yep. A ton of emphasis on like their religious group, which is also amazing. Yep. And then probably most predominant, at least in like my experience of adulthood so far, and I'm far less experienced than you, is like career. Like, it's really easy to maintain a friendship when you have to. Yeah. Because the career, and then to take the friendship outside of the career, I think is super, super valuable. Yeah. I've learned that probably the most over the last couple of years for sure. Yeah. So that's very, very true.
And if you can find people, for me, the evolution is where it doesn't have to be separate. Right? Yeah. Like, if you can find ways to make money with friends, like, you guys are starting this podcast, you're building a podcast. This could very much be the collective, like, beginning of a long-term LLC, a partnership on different types of ventures. It could be, you know what I mean? So
totally.
So they don't have to be compartmentalized. I look at Dusty and the way he runs his family business, and he actually employs my son too. Yeah. Like, his community, his tribe that he's built, he's got like whatever 80, 100 employees here, and then he's got few hundred overseas, right? Yep. Like, that's cool.
Yeah, that's so cool.
And in my professional space as CEO of my company, my leadership team, these are all people I really, really like. These are all people that I learn from, that I respect, that I admire. And we can hit a jazz game and actually have fun, or we can go, we can do stuff. And so I don't think they need to be so separate, compartmentalized. Yeah. Of course, there's professional, and then, you got to have that. But I think the more we can mix it, the better.
That's cool. I like that a lot. That's awesome. I totally agree with that. Okay, I'm going to take you back so we can finish your story. Okay. Yeah. That's my fault entirely. I'm sorry. Oh, man. But I was enjoying the story. I was loving it. So you finally go, you're persistent, you finally go and you get the job, and you're like bottom of the totem pole at Nu Skin, or you're just a sales rep at Nu Skin. Yeah. So you're helping open that channel that goes over to Korea, from what it sounds like. Yeah. And how long ago was that, first off?
Yeah. So, but just to be clear, so we use independent contractors, right? So I wasn't an independent contractor. I was an inside guy that worked and supported a group of 230 Korean speaking salespeople in the U.S.
Were you over them? Like, did you get brought in?
I was their account manager, right? So I worked with them to maintain, like, they had to produce their volume production, answer questions, help them out when they had problems processing stuff, kind of set goals with them.
So it was a pretty big role. Main goal. Like, you stepped into a pretty big role.
Yeah, I mean, it was like people just out of college. It wasn't too big at the time. Yeah, but we were prepping to go into Korean because I had spent a couple of years there. I spoke Korean. Yep. That's why they wanted me at the company. There weren't a lot of people speaking Korean. So I went into that. So I helped these guys for a year or so. No, actually, I helped these guys. It was only a 9-month deal, and then I had an opportunity to go join this commissions team to go kind of start building the plan for Korea, the way we would incentivize our salespeople, motivate behaviors, all that. So it kind of flipped into more like strategic.
Got it.
So I did that. Then I shipped over to Korea and helped launch the country over there. And I ended up spending that's about when I got married too. So I ended up spending most of my time in Korea. That's probably why I convinced anyone to marry me too, was like, you're just gone. Right.
Yeah.
And it was kind of FaceTime era. So
Yep.
I would come back for a week, and I did that through undergrad for the rest of the year and a half. Was just, I do 3 weeks in Korea, 1 week back at community college and working here.
And wife stayed back here.
And dating. Yeah.
Or dating, girlfriends, everything.
Yeah.
Stayed
Girl
back here.
stayed there. Jen is her name. So she stayed there and then came back a couple weeks, married. Like we dated like 2 years off and on like that. I mean, and then I ended up, we married, I took her over there for, I forget how long. It feels like 6 months, but maybe it was only 6 weeks. I don't know. And it was funny because we lived in the hotel. She never adjusted in the entire time to the time zone.
So she's nocturnal.
She's up all night.
She's nocturnal.
Right. Yeah. She's up all night. And I'm like trying to, and I'm working, and then she wants to like hang out. Right. So I'm like, so I was like no sleep. But it was a cool experience. So did that. And then I ended up spending, did that for Thailand, Philippines, Singapore. So kind of the same pattern now for the next few years. Yeah. And then there was this time, sorry, we'll kind of be quick on the whole career side because it's the boring part of it.
Please.
But we were doing the Philippines. We were opening the Philippines, and I traveled over there, and I'm like, man, this was like 1997 maybe.
Yeah.
And by the way, the world's changed so much. In 1996, there's an author, her name's Rosabeth Moss Kanter. She was a Harvard economist. She wrote a book called Globalization, Thriving in a Global Economy. And so you got to go back to, like, in Korea, when I lived, there were only 2 international brands, Coca-Cola, and you saw Nikes on people's like feet, like once, because I lived near college campuses in Korea.
Yeah.
You would see once in like 1 in 1,000 people had a Nike swoosh on their feet. And we'd play pick up basketball with the basketball team, and a couple of them would have Nikes.
Yeah.
So other than Coca-Cola and Nike, there were not global brands internationally.
Got it.
Right. So this is a different time. So fast forward a few years later, I'm opening Korea, and I go over there for the first time. I'm like, these people are poor. Like Philippines has 4,000 islands, right? In fact, a funny story. We're out on a boat, like going between islands, between work, like the work weeks.
Yeah.
And so like 6 of us go and get this little shoddy boat, and we're going between the islands for the weekend. And I remember pulling up, and there's this island with this half moon bay. There's this white house with a white picket fence on the beach. No other houses on the island. Like, it's just this little island. So we pull up, and we're like, man, this is a cool place to snorkel. The water's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so we get out and we start snorkeling, and I go to up and kind of swim up, and a lady comes walking out and from the house, and she's topless, right?
Yeah.
And must be European, whatever. Yeah, she's the only one on the island.
Yeah.
So we're kind of sitting over on this far side of the beach. We're far enough away. I can't see anything, whatever.
Yep. But
I could tell she was because she had for some reason everything's white in my imagination here, right?
Yeah.
But I thought it was a white swimsuit.
Yep.
All of a sudden I see these 2 little heads like floating in the water, and these 2 little Filipino kids like crawling up onto the beach to check her out, right? So these 2 little kids are like running up, and I'm like, where did these kids come from, right? Like they're just swimming out in the middle of nowhere. So anyways, we kind of like look around, and it's like, oh, there's an island over there, right? So these kids end up like hanging out on the beach, and they swim back to this island that's probably like half a mile away.
Oh my God.
And so we're kind of like just behind, like making sure they get back there, and we get there to their houses. And these things I'm not kidding, they're toothpicks on stilts above water, like shanty shacks. And I'm like, these people are freaking poor. Like poverty beyond anything I saw even in Korea.
Yeah.
And I started to think that, and I'm like, man, our business model's not going to work there. Like our products aren't going to work there. Our comp plan's not going to work there.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, so I get home, and on the flight home, I'm like, I'm going to come up with so I'm like 25, 26, whatever.
Yep.
I'm like, I'm going to come up with a new business plan for the Philippines. And like, I'm like, what do I know, right? I'm not an economist, but
yeah,
Rosabeth Moss Cantor's book. Anyways, the whole point was she wrote the book in '96. So I just read the book. I'm like, I'm going to build this, thrive in a global economy. So I get home. By the time I get home, I have this thing sketched out. I go into my boss at the time. By the way, there's a life lesson here. Go into my boss at the time, and he looks at it and he's like, man, that's not our job. Like that's not it.
Yeah.
Our job is to take the model and go in there. I'm like, yeah, but it's not going to be successful. And he's like, okay, that's not your job. And so I was like, well, could I go give it to the guys whose job it is? And he's like, no, like, do your job. And I'm like, okay, that's not cool.
Yeah.
So I'm down in the cafeteria and I'm sitting there, and our CFO's sitting there. And this guy's not a guy you want to approach, really.
Yeah.
Like, he's just smarter than everyone else and lets you know it. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, I need to tell Corey about this, because I thought it was a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
We'd never done anything like it.
Yeah.
And we, up until then, we always ran a global seamless plan, right? Like the same product, same everything. So I'm like, hey, I came up with this. I was in the Philippines, and I didn't tell him about the topless lady. I was like I'm,
spared him some details.
This market is like, we're not going to be successful unless we go do this. And I was like, I'd love to come present it to you. And he's like, yeah, cool, do it. So I go up, like, present it to him, and he's like, I like it. Like, let's do it. And I'm like what? And he's like, yeah, go back, detail it out, sketch it, like, give me the details, because it was just a sketch.
Yeah.
And let's meet next week. So I go back and I'm like, oh, this is cool. So I'm like working at night, like penciling this thing out. And my boss comes up to me and he's like, you talked to Corey about it? And I'm like, yeah. He loved it. And he was pissed. He was just like, that's not our job.
Yeah.
But now I had the cover of the CFO, right?
Yeah, you're safe.
So then I'm like, this guy's a couple layers below him. So I'm like, okay.
Politicking at its finest.
Hope. So I'm like, well, he asked me to do it. And he's like, well, just make sure to run it through me. I'm like, dude, I'm not running this through you. Like, this is my deal.
Yeah.
So inside, right? So
Yeah.
so anyway, so I start meeting with our CFO on the side. We build it out. And through that process, so we go over, we launch the market, we put this new product line in, new comp plan, totally fails, right?
Yeah,
like totally fails.
Perfect.
Because I didn't have the experience to do it.
Yeah.
But we come back and I'm like, well, when I say it fails, like, it failed over time. It just, the market didn't realize its potential. But like 6-8 months later, our CFO, he's like, hey, Ryan, I need somebody who's going to align the whole world around our global comp plan. Like, by the way, not the one you created for the Philippines.
Yeah, that one didn't work.
Another one.
Yeah.
And he's like, I want you to lead it. And I'm like, and this was right as I'm graduating then. So this is like second year and whatever. I'm trying to get the math right.
Couple years in.
But I'm getting ready to graduate, and I have this offer to leave the company and go do a strategy it's called Booz Allen Hamilton. It's going to be a strategy consulting firm. So I'm like, well, I think I'd love to do it, but I've got this other offer. And he's like, well, what is it? And I said, a strategy consult. He's like, you want to go consult people, or you want to build something? Like, go consult or build. And I'm like, well, I want to build, but they're paying me more money, so I'm going to go do it. And I, get to New York and whatever.
Yeah.
And by that point, I wanted to go live in a big city anyway. So I was like, let's do that. And he was like, okay, what are they paying you? I was like, so I think I even exaggerated a little bit,
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, well, I'll pay you more. Like I'll pay you what they're paying you plus 5,000 more. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So he puts me in as director, right? And I had never managed anybody, right? I'm like an individual contributor, never managed anybody.
Yeah.
Other than in my retail days as a 17, 18-year-old kid at a retail store.
Yep.
So I become director. And by the way, I learned all the bad habits from him, right? Like bulldog, don't care about anyone, totally forget every process in the company, HR processes, like, you just get the job done.
Yep.
Just do what you need to do, and I have your back. And so huge lessons there, right? But I kind of like there were so many lessons of like take the shot, right? Like that whole you miss all the shots that you don't take, Michael Jordan, whatever.
100%. Yep.
That was it. Like, take the shot. When you feel inspired to do something, you got to take the shot. Find people that are going to open the doors for you, as opposed to you trying to open them on your own. I think is huge. And then as a leader yourself, find people who have that drive and nurture it, because the drive, it's that Heraclitus quote, right? On any battlefield, 90 people shouldn't be there, and they're just fodder for the war. 9 are soldiers, and they make the battle. And then there's the one, and the one brings them all back, right?
Yep.
Like, that's the principle. Like, go find the one, because
Dump all
the
your
one will
energy into
power
that
the
one.
9.
Yep.
And then they're in society, there's always 90.
Yep.
Right. And by the way, I believe our role as the 1 or the 9 is to protect and to build for the 90, because society needs it. Right.
Yep.
And so anyways, that's kind of how the journey went up until, you know, being a director. And then last chapter on there to close and connect the dots was that this same guy, he goes to open China for us.
The CFO or CRO?
The CFO. And he switches and he's going to go become greater. So China was the biggest opportunity we'd had, right? It's going to be $1 billion business. He's going and he says, I want you to come over with me. And I'm like, sweet, right? He's my champion. He's my guy. I don't need to care about anybody else in the company. I can just get stuff done.
Yep. Let's
go. So travel over there, spent a ton of time living in a service apartment. It's called the Hong Kong service apartment, even though it was in Shanghai. I don't know why. Spent like almost a year prepping for this thing. Go over like the house hunting trip to go find. At that time, I'm married. I have 2 kids. And I come back and I'm like literally like proverbially packing up my office to go. And our CEO comes down. He's like, you're not going to China. And I'm like, huh? So I'm sending you to the UK. And I'm like, the UK is like a $20 million business. China's going to be $1 billion business. Yeah, but you need to break away from this guy. Like you need to learn how to be a leader on your own. You need to learn how to be a responsible leader, how to work with the bigger deal. And so he like killed the China opportunity and gave me this crappy opportunity. Now, it was a general manager, so I owned the whole business rather than just sales.
Yeah.
But it was for $20 million with very low potential compared to $1 billion potential.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, right, let's go do it. So I mean, it wasn't my call. I had to either do that or leave the company. So, so I left. I went and so I went and did the job.
Yep.
I left to go do the job.
Yep.
And that started a whole different career. And it was like this reprogramming of, number one, becoming my own person.
Yep.
Building my own leadership style, correcting a lot of habits I had learned by having the free hall pass of the guy that cleared all the things for me, having to learn organizational, reciprocal value creation with your peers and the people you work with.
And being fully accountable,
learning all aspects of the business. And that CEO that moved me into that, he then became my mentor then from the UK. His name's Truman Hunt. So Truman, he then takes from UK. We're supposed to be there for 3 years. We move. He asked me to move to Frankfurt after that. And I'm like, I mean, London's a pretty cool place to live, right? I mean, it's like, and also we're going to Frankfurt. Like Frankfurt's like, anyways, Frankfurt's great. Yeah. If you're a banker and I mean, it's just not London. Yep. So moved the family there, didn't want to move there, did a bunch of that, East Europe expansion, went back, decided at that point, I was like, I remember having this thought, like, maybe I could be like, no, the thought was, could I be CEO? Like, could I, like I watched Truman. Yeah. Could I do what he did? And I was like, the dude he actually has a JD. He's got an advanced degree. And for a publicly traded company, it's like, you got to have. Yeah. And I'm like, I got a community college degree. Right. So that doesn't work.
Were you thinking that out of like desire, like you wanted to do what he was doing, or out of pride, like, oh, I wonder if I could do what he's doing?
A little bit of both. It was more like it was just not enough. Got it. Like it was this, like if I could be
something
CEO,
higher,
if I could be CEO, then I'll be enough.
Got you.
That's what fueled it.
Got you.
And so that's what pushed me to that was the ambition the whole time. Like, don't do what my dad did. Yep. Like, have every hard conversation that I ever need to have, ask for every raise every time, take every opportunity. That was my MO. And in fact, like I was several times had HR coming at me and saying, like, stop asking for more money. And I'm like, guys, I'm the easiest guy you can employ. Pay me money and I'll do the job. Like, you don't have to ask. I will move anywhere in the world. I will. And even to the detriment of the family. Like, I'll do whatever it takes. I'll travel 7 million miles, which I think I'm like 7 million miles on airplanes. I will do whatever it takes. Just put me in, coach, and I'll score, right? Like, I got to prove myself. Yeah. So that's kind of that's the mindset I had.
That makes sense.
And so at that point, so I'm riding back on a plane from a meeting, and I'm like, I got to get an MBA, right? Like, I got to do this. Like, I got to stack, because community college degree is not going to work in a public company. Yep. And my buddy had just applied to Duke, right? And I'm like, well, Duke's like a top 10. I actually saw it in Delta magazine too, and it said like number 9 on the whatever. Use these, and I'm like, okay, if I'm going to do an MBA, I'm going to go like all in, big time. Like, I'm going top 10. So I'd land, and I call my buddy. I'm like, hey, like, how did you do this? He's like, I took the GMAT. So I'm like, okay, cool. So I go and I tell, get on, and I'm like trying to, I think by that point we had internet stuff, because that would have been whatever, 1990, whatever. And I'm like, oh, freak, that like the deadline for the Duke application is next Saturday. So I got to take the GMAT a week from today. And I have been out of school. I was never good at school, right? I'm literally like, I'm telling you, I'm average at everything. Yeah. And so I call my buddy again. I'm like, can you overnight me all your books, like, to prep for the GMAT? And he's like, yeah. So he sends them over to me. Like, I'm looking at them, like trying to just cram to take the GMAT. Yeah. Turns out, like, I'm sure I didn't pass, but when you're paying $96,000 a year, and by the way, the company covered it for me too. So I was like, okay, sick. That's cool. But I just remember, I saw it. So they didn't accept me on my score, but they were interested in this kid that had all this general manager experience, and then now was a regional vice president for Europe and I'm 27 or whatever. And so they're like, okay, let's have him in for an interview. So my math score was so bad. Like, it wasn't the math score. The score was okay, but the work product because they send you the result was like so non-traditional that they forced me to do a review with the dean of the math department at Duke. Because she's like, I don't know how you got your answers, but your answers are right. So they were like, I think they thought I cheated through this. So I'm like, go through this thing, and I'm walking her through it. And she's like, send me your work. She sent me the separate package. She sends it to me, and she's like, you're getting the answers right, but you don't use any of the Pythagorean theorem. Like, I don't even know what that is. Yeah. But you can kind of figure out what the area of a triangle is without it, right? Like, it's like a square and then cut off the edges. So then you estimate. So like, that was my whole thing. And so she's like, well, I don't know. This guy, somehow he got in. So they put me into the program. I barely passed through that, but I commute the whole time, right? So I'm doing North Carolina, and we rotated semesters because I had this partnership with a university in Frankfurt. And so I did a semester there, semester here, semester there. And then I worked full-time expanding into East Europe. So the company was great. They paid for it. They allowed me to do all that, to be distracted for 2 years. But that totally set me up. So invest in your people, huge lesson. When you find the one, like,
you dump all your resources into
it. Like, you find that one salesperson, right? Like, you're going to spend every moment, because that one's going to make all the difference. It makes the battle. It makes 100%. The whole thing work. And so that was a lesson for me doing that. And so I did that. Comes to the end of the journey over there, and I'm like, I can't wait to get out. Like, I got to get out, and get back recentered and all that, better for the family, all that. So we get home, we come in and get back to Utah. I'm like, this will be good. We can resettle. So, like, I'm telling you, like, 2 months into being home, been gone for a few years, need to restabilize. We're sitting in this business review. And I remember this table at the Marriott. It's like a U shape. And there's probably 20 people sitting around it. And I'm behind our CEO, Truman, our guy, sitting behind him, like couple seats over, and kind of a support staff to the management team, the global management team. Yeah. Because I still wasn't that, right? And we had just hired a new guy in to become president of Japan. And I'm listening to his presentation. Like, this is his first strategic or his business planning presentation. Yeah. And I'm like going like, this is not going good. Like, and I remember he had this slide, this PowerPoint, and there were 6 buckets, and there was this word cloud above it, you know? Yeah. And he goes, I mean, I'll never forget this. This is like the best lesson of what not to do ever. But he says, our business strategy for whatever it was, 2009, it's 2008, is, there's a pause. And he has one of the guys, he signals to him. And the guy pushes the enter button on the keyboard, and all the word cloud funnels into 6 buckets. And he turns to our CEO and says, "That's our plan." And our CEO, like, he's a good guy, but he's a little quiet, a little quieter. And all of a sudden he's like, starts looking around. He's like looking around. Like, I think like, did this just happen? Right? Like, literally, they're supposed to take 30 minutes on it, and he did it in like 30 seconds. And he looks around and he like cranks his neck, which I can't do. And he sees me and he goes, "Ryan, take these guys to your office and don't come out until you have a business plan that will grow the business." And I'm like, okay.
You're like, oh shit.
So he literally dismisses us in front of everyone else. I have nothing to do with Japan, by the way. I'm doing like, I don't even know. I think I was doing global compensation again. I think I just came back for that. And I'm like, we walk over to the 4th floor, because I'm not on the 9th floor, right? I'm middle management.
Yep.
And I sit in there. I don't know any of these guys, right? We just hired the new guy. He's supposed to be this really experienced COO/CEO guy of a $700 million business. And here's the $20 million business guy.
Yep.
That, by the way, wasn't that successful doing the 20 mil anyways. I got into some new markets, whatever. So we go and work, and I like, it was the craziest thing. I mean, it was just such a weird event. But I remember the first thing was, I was like, okay, what do you guys have like to work with? And he pulls out his laptop. Well, his head of whatever operations pulls out a laptop. He's like, oh, it's out of charge. Plugs it into the wall, opens it up. And the same guy, the president of the market, gets up out of the chair and walks to go walk around and pulls the laptop off the table, and it hits the floor and breaks the laptop.
No.
They got nothing. Like, they don't even have the word cloud in the 6 buckets anymore.
No.
There's nothing, right? So anyway, so we spend like 3 or 4 days together. We build a new plan. I call Truman, like, okay, we got the plan. Can we come present it? He's like, yeah, come up and present it. So we go up and present it, and he's like, he liked it enough. I guess the fact that it was anything
Was better.
and
than
he was
nothing.
like, okay, can you go to Japan and implement it? I'm like, hell yeah, let's go. Right. So forget the family. Like, who cares about recovering any
You came
of that?
back to get recentered,
Yeah.
and a few
No,
months
but
later,
opportunity,
you're like,
brother.
Come on.
Opportunity
Come on.
presents itself, right? And so I make the mistake, not the mistake. I make the decision.
Yep.
Nothing in life's a mistake. You make the decision, right?
Yep.
And so it's like, hey, let's pack up. Let's go to Japan. And Jen, kids, they're like, what? We just bought the house. So I ship over early, right? They join me 3 or 4 months later, and we spend 10 years there. And by the way, payback's right?
Yep.
Like at that point, she's detached from me. You know,
I was gonna say she's a trooper in the first place.
She's a killer trooper. She's
Yep.
she's hardcore. She became very independent.
It's amazing.
Needed to be, right? I was all
Yep.
over the place and doing my thing. And so so we went over. And by the way, we had an amazing journey. Like Japan, unbelievable. We were talking about the culture there. So many lessons came out of that. So many life experiences, so much heartache.
Yep.
So much recentering for me personally of the type of person I want to be, recentering on my value system and defining that instead of it always being spoon-fed. I think when our parents raise us, it's spoon-fed to values, but then you have to really learn what it is that you believe in and what it is that motivates you, right?
Yep.
And so through hardships, we learn that. So for me, it was a very learning experience of that, and brings me back to the karma and the book and the, and Joe and my friends and all of that. And that was a 10-year journey. It started to take a couple of years of commuting back and forth to do strategy for our same CEO. So he really was a mentor to me. He gave me so many opportunities.
That's awesome.
To climb and do different things. And by that point, I had seen most of the world.
Yeah.
We're in 48 countries, and so I knew most of the business.
Mhm.
And he just came back and said, "Listen, I'm going to retire at some point." And maybe the final chapter on the story is, so he decides he wants to step down. We're a public company. Boards are always tough over time.
Yep.
I think he was over that, and so he asked me to start leading strategy for the enterprise. So I did that. Commuted back and forth for 2 years. That was great on the marriage, as you can imagine. So every weekend was on a plane, and then was either in the US or in Japan or somewhere else in the world for 2 years. came back finally, and at that point, global president. He asked me to be global president of our core business, and then he decided to leave. And I think the plan was either for me. What I thought the plan was is I was going to become CEO. Turns out I had no experience with the board. Public boards make the decision on CEO.
Yep.
Last minute, like total change, because I had another opportunity outside the company to go be CEO of a pretty big company out and based in New York. And I turned that down because of this.
Yeah.
So I think he felt a little bit like he was sliding me when it was really more a board decision.
Yep.
And I wasn't ready. I'd never run a publicly traded company. I had no experience with the board. So last minute, our chairman calls me in and he's like, hey, would you be willing to work with our then CFO, Rich Wood, and you guys partner? You be president of Nu Skin, he'll be CEO. He does public co, you do the strategy. I'm like, listen, as long as I get to own everything that I want to own, I'm in. Like, I'll do that, and we could work well together.
Yep.
So did that journey for a few years, and then the company, the board decided to refocus on resources and all of that, and he had opportunities, and so then they asked me to be CEO, and so I've been CEO now for 2 years. Through some of the hardest times, right? COVID,
exactly,
economic meltdown,
perfect time for you to.
And it's been, and by the way, that's the most humbling part of this whole thing. By the time I became enough, right? Like by the time I became CEO, guess what happens? The business tanks, right? We lose $600 million in China.
Yeah.
$600 million. Like our most profitable business, right? Everything. We have hyperinflation. The highest inflation we've experienced since 1920, right? Happens in the same year. Like everything falls apart. And you know what happens is you have to really decide, am I enough now? Because
can I make this thing happen?
That's it. That's
so wild.
And it's been this whole like beautiful journey now of coming back to saying it's not about any of that. I'm becoming enough. I haven't answered that question.
Yep.
I can't affirmatively say I'm enough for myself. I don't know that I ever will be, but I believe I'm showing up as a dad.
Yep.
I believe I'm showing up as a CEO for my people. I operate with integrity with our investors. I will never tell them something that I don't believe we can accomplish. So you know what? That's enough.
Yep. 1,000%. That's awesome. That is so crazy.
So that's the journey.
That's a fun journey. You've done a lot of shit.
Yeah, it's been fun.
And you've been a lot of places. That's so crazy.
Yeah.
So I guess I have a few questions for you. And I love it. Like that's so entertaining. And I love when people that I don't know super well, but like I kind of know through everyone else and everything like that. It's so fun to go and hear like in-depth story, and you have a really cool story, and it's a lot of fun. So thank you. I appreciate it. Few questions for you.
Yeah.
So as you were coming up, you mentioned there was one point in time where you're like, oh, I wonder if I could be CEO, or like, could I do that? And it was from multiple different places of motivation. Like, did you feel like, and you also mentioned on the flip side, you've also mentioned, dude, I was always average. Like I was always average.
100%.
How did you, or maybe you didn't, have both perspectives of like, oh, I'm super average, and oh, could I be CEO? Those are very contradicting. Or did something change where it was like, oh, like, I could go and do that, or I wonder if I could. I'm curious there. Like, did you have both?
So they say you can never connect the dots going forward, but you connect them going back.
1,000%.
Right.
Yeah.
So at the time of the thought, could I be? It was a question. It wasn't I could be.
Yep.
Like,
got it.
Like I some of my friends have the confidence that I've always aspired to have, where they probably would have said, I can be at that. Mine was a thought, a question, could I be? What I've learned looking back and connecting the dots backwards is that, again, but persistence over time will beat everything else.
I love that.
Like, it's not about, like, people think it's about the one move, and like all of a sudden Elon Musk is Elon Musk. All of a sudden Jeff Bezos is Jeff Bezos. All of a sudden Todd Peterson is Todd Peterson. Casey Baugh is Casey Baugh. It's not. The consistency and the persistency wins every time.
100%.
It really does. And what you find out, it doesn't matter if it's fitness, profession, fitness, being a dad, like whatever's important to you. I've come to So, you know, you talk about like there's hope, there's belief, there's faith, there's knowledge, right?
Yep.
And I'm not just talking, I'm not religiously or spiritually. I'm saying like the journey is what I know. I don't know a lot in life. Like I know very few things.
Yeah.
I hope for things. I believe things.
Yeah.
I have some faith in things.
Yeah.
I only know like a couple of things. The one thing I do know is persistence will beat everything else over time. And so the point of having, like my grandpa gave me a magazine. So this is, again, growing up, right? So there's a finance magazine called Kiplinger's Magazine.
Yeah.
And my grandpa would always give me, so he gave me two things. Once was the book, The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale when I was 12 years old.
Yep.
He gave me a copy of the blue covered book. This Reverend Norman Vincent Peale talks about for the first time. It was like my first self-help moment of like this idea of, wait, I can build myself. Like I can, there's something that clicked in me.
Yeah.
And I remember at a young age of like, I have like we all have mental health issues, right? But I remember as a young kid, I read this in the book. It was this, you should say this saying every time you wake up. This is the day which the Lord hath made. I shall rejoice and be glad in it. And repeat that 6 times before you get out of bed. And that will help you with your day.
Say it again one more time.
This is the day which the Lord hath made. I shall rejoice and be glad in it. So it was written in like the 1930s
awesome.
or 20s, right?
Yeah.
And he's a reverend, right? So it was kind of religious. I remember as a 12, 13-year-old kid thinking, I need to read that and say that every single morning. And so until I was 25, 30, that's what I said every single morning, just to get out of bed. And then I heard, I don't know if you guys have ever seen Ocean's 11.
Oh, yeah.
So you know where Brad Pitt says, I'm only suicidal in the morning. Have you ever seen that quote?
I have seen that quote.
When I heard that,
the Ocean's movie.
he like that was a click, and I was like, now again, I don't want me to make light of like mental health, suicide, real thing. I remember having those feelings of like, not suicide, meant like I needed that to get out of bed, like just as a 12-year-old. Like that's weird,
like a
right?
kickstart. You need something to get.
But he gave me that book, and then he would give me his used Kiplinger's magazines, which I had no idea, like any of the terms in the balance sheet, income statements, profit, operating margin, what stock price, equities, no idea. But I'm reading through it one day as a 14-year-old. I still have this. Actually, I put it in a book, and I found the book about 5 years ago. And I'm looking through, and there's an ad for a finance. I think it's like Washington Mutual, or no, it's an index fund. The ad is an older man sitting on the beach, and it's kind of like, it's not black and white, but it's kind of like aged black and white, you know, kind of that soft white. And he's sitting on a beach looking at the ocean, and you can tell he's an accomplished man at probably 65, 70 years old. And there's a dock behind him, and he's sitting there with a cardigan black sweater on and khakis with the khakis rolled up. Very visual.
Yeah.
And there's a line, a Henry David Thoreau quote at the bottom of it. It says, go confidently in the direction of your dreams. Live the life you imagine. Like, I read that.
You were 14.
I was 14. And I'm like, freak yeah, I can build this life.
That's
so I ripped it out. So I found the book. I found in my Power of Positive Thinking, it was folded up. In there about 5-6 years ago.
That's so sick.
And so I've now framed it. I've got a picture of it. I've got the actual ripped out thing from when I was 14. But my point is that like that gift that he gave me of go confidently in the direction of your dream. Like not like it's a direction. It's just an idea. Like we don't have to have it all. Again, you can't connect. There's nobody that connect the dots going forward. There's no fortune teller that will that will do that. That can't do that. We can't do that. But we all can dream and vision like what we want. Generally. Like what do you, and I'm not saying like a private jet. I'm saying what is the life you want? And for me, it was the guy sitting on the beach that had no worries. He looked like he had no worries. He looked like he had financially, and I think because I saw a little bit of my grandpa who had a little bit of success. He was a salesman, traveling salesman. So he'd made enough money to retire at 55, and then found out $1 million at 55 doesn't go a long ways. So he had to come back to work again at 60, go back in retirement, then come back to work at 65. And then he repped tools until he died at 92. But he had enough that I was like, man, that's success. Right. And that guy looks like my grandpa, but even even better because my grandpa never sat on the beach. So I'm
Yep.
like, that's the life I want.
Yeah.
And so I tie that back to the point of just saying, like your question around like what was it that drove and pushed me back then, and did I think I could do it? And I was like, no, could I do it? Was the question.
Yeah.
And then the persistency over time towards that direction. And then, by the way, then you get it. And I'm like, that's not what I thought.
That's not what I thought it was. Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually all the problems, right?
Yep.
It's all the problems that nobody else can solve that you're expected to solve. And I don't have a crystal ball.
Yep.
But what I have is a vision and a direction for my business, not just my life, for the business. And I'm like resolutely, concretely believe that's the right transformational vision of that business. And so again, as long as I'm in the seat, that's where I'm going.
Yeah.
And when that seat ends, what I have to be comfortable with along this path, because it could end at any time. Now I report to the board.
Yep.
I am paid by our
Powers in
investors.
their hands. Yep.
And any day I have to know that that's not me.
Yep. 100%.
And that's real hard to do when you built your whole life thinking, I'm
for
not
sure.
enough, and this has become the proxy for it.
For
right?
sure. For sure.
So that's what I hope to be.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think something really valuable that you just hit on, like really, really valuable. Remind me the quote that was in the newspaper that you have framed about direction.
Go confidently in the direction of your dream. Live the life you imagine.
So that
Henry David Thoreau.
That's so gold, because a lot of people get so fixated and they have this premise and this belief that success is a destination.
Yeah.
But if you can shift that and you can understand that success is actually making sure you're on the right trajectory, that allows you to go be persistent and patient and actually do what you need to do to go get to where you want to go, basically.
100%.
And in my field, a lot of people get so hyper-focused and attached to, like, they don't view success as going in the right direction. They view success as, I made it here. Like, I made this much, or I did this, or I accomplished that. That's success.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. Otherwise, people that start in your position wouldn't end up in
hollow.
your position.
It's so empty. In fact, do you guys know? So speaking of Japanese culture, but it's funny. I lived there for 10 years and I didn't learn any of this.
Yeah.
But you know the principle. Have you ever heard the principle Ikigai?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I've seen that quote a million times on Pinterest.
Yeah, Ikigai. I mean, it's this principle. In fact, I'm reading a book called Ikigai right now. But it's this idea of our life's purpose. Like, what is it that only I can do? And it's this like Venn diagram of 4 areas, right? It is, what do I love? What does the world need? What am I good at? And what can I make money doing?
Yep.
Right. And it's this Japanese idea that we all need a true life's purpose. If your life's purpose is making money, if your life's purpose is being CEO, if your life's purpose is, it's all hollow. But if your life's purpose is what I love, but I mean, you can love something and be sucky at it. You're never going to be great.
Yep.
You can love something that the world doesn't need. You're never going to make money.
Yep.
You can love something and make money doing it, but if you're not good at it, you're not going to be fulfilled.
Yep.
But so this idea of those 4 and that principle of Ikigai, like finding that life's purpose, to me is like, if at a young age, because I talk to people, my kids all the time, I'm like, go find your passion. They're like, I don't know what I'm passionate about. And I'm like, yeah, in fairness, you know what? I still don't know. Like, I love to race cars. I love to work out. I love to ski. I love to do all these activities. If I could make money at them, maybe that would be my Ikigai.
Yeah.
But the reality is I'm kind of average at all of them.
Yeah.
So that's not it.
They're hobbies.
They're hobbies, right? But it's like this idea of like, no. And so I have this whiteboard. Well, you've been at Casey's house, right? So he has this great office. So I bought his house. Yep. He's got this glass board. So I painted this thing. It's not painted. I mean, it's this pink marker that's like, now it's hard to get off. I don't know how to get off. I'm going to have to go buy some stuff. And I put these 4 vans there of like, what do I love? What does the world need? What am I good at? And how can I make money? And from each one, I've built boxes. And I'm literally like filling those boxes out constantly.
That's so
of
cool.
Like, what are the 10 things that I love that the world needs and then I cross-reference this thing. Like once a week, Sunday, I'm like looking at it, I'm going like, okay, that doesn't work anymore. Turns out I'm not good at that. Boom, boom, boom. And then, but my goal is the next 10 years, like I'm going to figure that out. If I could figure that out when I was 20, 25, 30, not figure it out. If I could pursue life that way figure that freaking thing out, that question, what is it? Tony Robbins, right? Like we underestimate what we could do in a year, but we overestimate what we do in a year. 1 year, underestimate in a lifetime. Yep. So imagine doing that, like figuring out in your 20s should be all about exploration. Like to me, if I look back, it's decades, right? The 20s is all about exploration. Like you guys are going to live to 126. Like that Time Life article, you guys are going to like literally, you're going to live the medical advancements. You're going to live to 126. Just don't break your neck, right? But like, so 20s are about like exploration in every way of life. And I'm not saying like go do psychedelics, whatever. But I'm saying figure it out. 30s at that point to me is like, okay, now I know directionally what I like. If you could do Ikigai, map it, and then in your 30s figure that out. Yep. And then 30s, 40s, you're just plowing forward. By the time you hit my age, you're at nirvana. Yep. And then and then go live 76 years doing that.
True. That's so cool. I love that. I think that's so golden. I think like that's like the best advice you could give someone young. Like the best advice you could give someone young is get clear, or at least semi-clear, or at least start pursuing the clarity of figuring out where you want to be, and then just start working towards it. Yeah. And don't be frustrated by the fact that you don't know, because I'm 50 and I'm trying to figure it out. Yeah.
Like it
100%.
takes time, but it's, as you said, it's the journey of learning and figuring it out. And don't be frustrated with yourself. Yeah. And that's, so another Tony Robbins quote is, happiness is the realization of pursuing a worthy ideal. Yeah. So it's not, happiness is not any type of destination. It's that you're aware that you're actually pursuing a worthy ideal. And in order to do that, you have to have some idea of what a worthy ideal is. And you also have to celebrate the wins along the way. Well, and I've heard it even a slight iteration of that, which is success is the pursuit of that, which I think generationally they're different. Like for me, it seems like my generation, the Gen Xers, it's all about, like, the baby boomers were all about, like, put your head down, do your job. Like just the greatest generation of all time. Just be stoic, do your job. Not stoic. They weren't as mindful about stoicism, but just do your job. Yep. My generation was all about success, asset accumulation. You know what I mean? Like we measured worth of life on possession. Yep. It feels like your generation is much more on experience and happiness, and if you can, if between happy, so in my generation, success would not equal happiness, and happiness would not equal success. Yep. If you guys can figure out how success actually equals happiness, and how happiness actually equals success, if that's true, if that's a truism, like we were talking about earlier, like you've hit it, man. That's nirvana. Yeah. You know what I mean?
100%.
Because that quote that you just said should be about happiness is the worthy pursuit, not success.
Yeah, 100%.
Success, meaning
how you define it. Yeah, it's how you define it is super, super important. And I think there's a lot of ways to look at that too. I think in that equation, like substitutes or additional parts to the equation is like, like my belief, and maybe I need to get to the point where success completely equals happiness. My belief, and I think like a really important belief, is progress equals happiness, or progress equals success.
Oh no. If you're there, like, you're so far beyond success equals.
Kind of, but then you get consumed in, like, if you're not progressing enough, then it's like self-defeating. Does that make sense? Yeah, but you can always measure 100%. You can always measure progress in a way that's like defeating rather than empowering.
So I'm going to ask you the question then. I know we're over time, but we're going to have to cut this in threes.
Go for it.
So what fuels you then? Because you're saying progress. So progress.
Yep.
You've seen the achiever versus the competitor versus the. So if you're focused on progress, you're an achiever more than a competitor, even. Like,
for sure.
Or are you both?
No. And
it's more personal.
This year, it's way more personal. And this year literally was the first year. It's a cool question, because this is the first year I've been able to really go define like what drives me. Yeah. And like over the last 7 years of my career, I've done some pretty like big things in my industry where it's like, oh, that's like impressive, and like what drove you to do that? Yeah, you achieved, you hit that level that not many people get to. Like, what pushed you there? And my answer was always kind of surface level, because I didn't know. My answer was always, I'm extremely competitive, which is true.
Yeah.
But not competitive enough to do what I've done, right? And then I'm like, no, that might not have been it. Like, oh, like I'm so against how I grew up, like financially, I wasn't going to let that happen.
Yeah.
That's also not even it. But what I've learned, and maybe this evolves and changes even more, like what pushes me is I have been so lucky to have certain people. In case he was just on the podcast again for I think a third or fourth time, and like first time anyone made me cry on the podcast, which is effed up of him. But if somebody believes in me, like Casey basically believed in me way more than I believed in myself. Like I remember having conversations and he would talk to me as if I was like capable of all of this. And in my mind, I was like, dude, I've never even thought that way. But then I felt like I owed it to him 1,000% to go and like fulfill on that. And what I've realized my driving force is I don't want to let people down. Like that's like my so progress, and that's how it can be negative in some ways. I feel like even if I'm progressing, if I could truly believe that any type of progress in the right direction is happiness and success, I agree that's super wise. But the way I measure it sometimes, and I'm working on it, is if I'm not progressing enough. Right? Like I can be doing everything and everyone's like, dude, you're freaking killing it. But I don't feel like it's like similar to you, right? Like I'm not progressing enough and I'm not fulfilling enough on, like I'm letting people down in some way, right? If I'm doing really good at work, but I'm not being a very good brother, like not enough, right? Like if I'm crushing it in my relationship, but then I take time away from work and I'm not being as good of a director for my people. Does that make sense? So it's like weird.
So do you, I mean, you've heard the 1% principle, right?
Tell me.
So you know, there's the 10,000 hours, right?
Yep.
Which we all know.
Yep.
Kobe's big on it. You know, Michael Jordan big on it. Everyone like, and it's kind of a truism, right? Like you do something long enough hours intentional practice, you achieve it. What people lose is this notion that progress is very incremental. Again, persistence over time.
Yeah.
And so the point of progress and the 1% is get 1% better. Don't try to get 100% better.
Yep. That's exactly what I struggle with.
You know, I get 1% better.
Yep.
And then if every single, it's like literally we're building a book. Like if your life is a book, every single day is a piece of paper.
Totally.
Right? It's one page.
Yeah.
In fact,
totally.
Have you seen the Mr. and Mrs. Smith? Have you seen that movie?
The movie?
With
There's
Vince?
a new show too.
There's a new show.
Yeah, but I did see the movie. Yes,
okay, so you know where Vince Vaughn. So Brad Pitt says he comes in because he finds out his wife's a spy, right?
Yep.
And he gets his buddy Vince, right? And he goes to Vince's house, and Vince is sitting there, and he's like, John, listen, it's like you're writing a book, right? The first 10 chapters, Johnny's been a chump, right? Like she totally took you, right? She's been like cheating on you. She's been doing all this stuff. You've been a chump. But guess what? You get to write the last chapter, right? And he was trying to convince him to go kill her, right? Because she's a spy.
Yeah.
But I kind of feel like that's life, right? Every book, every morning we wake up, and then is a page. And every second of the day is a word that we're writing on that page.
Yeah.
And so if you think about your life as the book, and whether your book is like Dune of like 6 books or whether it's one, like it's the depth of the book that matters, not the quantity of the reading.
Yeah.
It's like if we think of our life as like we're every day we live, we're filling that page up.
Yeah.
And sometimes the stuff on the page doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
And then sometimes
it's that one line that
the
stands
one
out.
line that relationships never die, they only evolve. Our brains are built to be moments, right? Chip and Dan Heath, right? The book Moments. They wrote this book called Moments, and they did this study. Disneyland did this study, and they go out and they survey on site, right? They survey on site guests, right? Have you been at Disneyland? They ask you a bunch of questions, right? And when you get there, and it's like whenever you go into this, like the lines are too long. The food's too expensive. The ticket was too expensive. It's too hot. I'm sweating. We don't have you need more shade. Blah, 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 blah. So that's their feedback when you're at the park.
Yep.
Yeah, whatever. You get a few positives, but most of their feedback is negative.
Yep.
Then they do a 5-year outlook, and they go and they poll people that have been to Disneyland 5 years ago.
Yep.
And they say, what is your impression of Disneyland? 96% of people say it was one of the highlights of the year.
Happiest place on earth.
Happiest place on earth. So they said, why? Why is
That's
they don't
interesting.
understand, because the surveys all say the negative, mostly negative.
Yeah.
Thus 5 years later, and the answers are the smile on my daughter's face when she got off Dumbo. I had time with my oldest son, who's a teenager and wouldn't give me the time of day except when he's on Indiana Jones. The moment, the one-liner in the chapter
Yep.
is what our brains recall, right?
That's cool.
And so
Never heard that.
if you think about your life like is a book, and progress is literally the work, like everything we do. And yeah, you might wake up, like, I don't know what time of day you wake up. Like if I wake up after 7, like I feel like I'm the laziest piece of, you know what?
Yep.
And so I have to wake up earlier. Well,
Yeah.
guess what? When I broke my neck, I told myself, I'm going to wake up to the sun. Like
Mhm.
I'm going to sleep as long as I humanly can, because by the way, I'm up most of the night with it.
Mm-hmm.
But immediately I feel like a piece of crap. Right.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, no, I got to heal, let myself heal.
Yeah.
But my point in the book side is to say, literally, if every moment is a word on that page at any point, literally, like you screwed up this morning, you did something, whatever. I don't
Yep.
care. Like what are you look at porn, like, I don't care what it is. You do
Yep.
something you're not proud of. This moment right now, this word on the page forward, I get to rewrite. I get to write, not
You
rewrite.
get to control. Yep.
I get to write it. And so the progress, I feel like when we look at that, we combine the ideas of the moments theory, which is your success in life, progress in life is actually, if you were to ask me, we've spent an hour and a half on this,
Mhm.
but I've kind of boiled down my life into, there's like been 10 things that
Yeah.
have created success. 10.
Mhm.
And I've lived 50 years. Like how many days is that? Like I've lived 18,250 days, and I can think of, maybe I'm lying, I could think of, there's probably 20 or 30 moments that actually have determined my relative value of success.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
There's a
That's
whole much
crazy.
more
Yeah.
moments that have determined my happiness, though,
Yeah.
than success. So anyways, be patient with personal progress and realizing that we literally are writing every word from today forward. And it didn't matter that I woke up this morning at 8:03
Yeah.
instead of 7,
Yeah.
because I spent 2 hours in the gym before this, and I've just spent 99.59 minutes talking with you on a great conversation. So my worth today matters a whole lot more than the fact that I woke up at 8:03.
100%. No, that's really, really cool. That's really cool. I've never ever looked at it like that. And I understand the principle behind it, and I've heard that principle explained in a lot of ways, but I really like that way. Like that's your life's a book and every day's a page, and you get to control anything coming up. And that also reiterates kind of the whole point of the podcast, the name of the podcast, like that quote, everything is like just today's the day, right now is the moment, so on and so forth. So I really, really love that.
And
Dude,
we capture that because we got to get the Ichigo Ikigai. Right?
Oh,
Which
yeah.
we said this morning.
Exactly.
Like truly, I just read this. I literally just read it on Tuesday, and I just posted it on my Instagram. So that's a Japanese saying that this Ichigo, this moment in time, Ichigai, will never happen again, right? This moment in time will never happen again. So cherish this moment, right?
Yeah.
And it's the principle of like being present, being now, which name of the podcast I love, because that's the whole point of, and by the way, I've spent my entire life living in the future or the past.
Yep.
50 years. I promise I haven't spent more than a collective 3 years living in the present.
Yeah.
And those 3 years have probably come in the last 5 years.
Yeah. Well, life makes it difficult to do that. Like
Totally.
life, social media, the internet,
100%.
success, your job, your responsibilities make it really, really hard to do it. And I think that's why it's so valuable, because you've had a pretty extraordinary 50 years from the outside looking in, from the inside coming out. You're like, dude, 3 years of that I've been present. And those are probably the 3 collective years where you find the most amount of happiness,
100%.
which is really cool.
100%.
I love that.
Okay, I got to tell you this. This is so funny. So I'm not a big Instagram guy. In fact, if you look at my feed, right, it's like I clearly do it myself, right? Like I'm just now like getting my team. I have a whole team, and I'm like, no, that's my space. I don't want to give it over to the company, because I don't do a lot of company posting, which I should do more.
Yeah.
I should do more because it's a big part of my life. But it's always like, my daughters are always like, Dad, you post one more like backcountry ski video I'm going to freak out.
Yeah.
So then I start, okay, I'm going to post like book quotes, right? Because I follow Ryan Holiday and I love reading. I've come to, by the way, that's a hack.
Yeah.
Because most people stop learning when they get finished with school.
Yeah.
Like, actually, your generation's a lot better than mine. But like, you read, you can take over everything. Like you read persistently books over time.
Yeah.
Read 1 a month, 12 a year.
Take over.
You'll take over. Like that's a huge hack.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying like audio books, whatever you want to do, physical books, whatever. But anyway, so I'll post on that stuff, right? So I had a post. So this is so funny. So I'm kind of like whatever. I'm starting to do it more, whatever. I need to, my social media team says, Ryan, you need to post more frequently. So I'm like, okay, whatever. So I start like, what am I going to post? What I want it to be authentic. So I'm like, whatever. So I'm sitting there and I find remix, right? Have you found the remix feature?
What is the remix feature?
So if you click on the three dots,
these boys know.
If you click on the 3 dots, you can remix. So you see a post you like.
Yeah.
And hit remix, right? And when you hit remix, you can add your own content, right? Whatever. And then you share it and it will go viral or not, right? So, so like I don't leverage my social media at all, whatever. It's all boring stuff. Cat videos, right? I have a cat bear, so whatever. That gets a little attention. Turns out cats are popular on Instagram.
I believe that.
So one day I see this post and it's one of those, I don't get really like touched by social media. Like once every 1,000 posts, I'll see one that I'm like, oh, that's meaningful. So I see this one. It's about Shark Tank. And I don't know if you've seen this one. Shark Tank, the guy, this girl's on Shark Tank pitching to Mark Cuban and these guys and says, and she's there with her 2 siblings, her 2 brothers. And she starts telling this story about how her father started a chop block business, cooking block. And then her mom gets cancer, right? And her mom passes away. And so her dad has to go, it's just terrible. He's a fireman. Mm-hmm. So he has to give up his side business to take care of the mom while he's being a fireman, right? To take care of the family. Mother passes away from cancer. A few years later, he gets cancer. Right? He places an order for 2,000 chopping blocks. He then gets cancer. So, and then dies, right?
Gosh.
And it turns out he's a New York City firefighter who got cancer from it breathing in World Trade Center dust.
Goodness sakes.
From it. So a hero, mother dies, father dies. Now the girl's on pitching Shark Tank to give him money to finish the dad's business. I post it. I remix it. Yeah. Right? I don't even know what remix is at the time. This is my first remix. I click on the dots, hit remix. I got to add something, right? I didn't even mean to steal content. I was just like, so this post, so I put dads ... show up. Like that's what happens when dads show up. Like your kids will do for the rest of your life. Like dads
take
show
your legacy.
Right?
Yeah.
So I post this thing. It has 10 million views, right? It's just taken off. It has like 896,000 likes. It has, and it's going up like 200 followers a day. Like, I don't know. Like
You're blowing. You're blowing up. You're blowing up.
It's blowing up. What's even better about it is I hit 1,200 comments. Now, again, for a guy that posts on backcountry stuff and gets like 170 posts or not even comments, likes. Yeah. This thing's off the charts, right? Yeah. So I never read comments, right? So I start before that. So I start reading these 1,200 quotes, and you'll see on this thing, there's like, you must be so proud. Like, so that's one of them. You must be so proud. And I'm like, huh? Like, okay. And then another one says, anyways, the quotes just keep, the posts keep going on. And I'm reading like, you must be so proud. Your children are so beautiful. And that was the one where I was like, well, you think this is me. And then I'm like, well, wait, so you haven't even watched the whole thing. You haven't even watched the post, because clearly if you have, I'm posting this from the dead. Like I'm gone. What? And then that keys off a whole other set of comments, right? That are like posted down to being like, it's not him, it's other people. And then they get in debate. And then I get in this whole Trump versus Biden like debate going on in the comments. And I'm like, this has nothing to do, because I'm sure somebody said, well, that wouldn't have happened under Trump's watch, you know? And then it's like, and I'm sitting there going, what? Like, anyways,
everyone's missing the point.
The whole thing is everyone missed the point, and I'm getting a couple hundred followers a day, so I guess it's
crazy. That's crazy.
But I think the point of let's use social media in a good way,
100%,
not in a stupid way.
I love that. Good luck convincing everyone to do that because 95% is stupid shit.
But truthfully, the stuff we put, and this is what I love, and we can wrap up here. But what I love about what you guys are doing, it's the same thing as I said about the toxic, and that's where I was meaning to go with that whole thing that kicked off a 2-hour podcast. Is like putting good stuff into the universe, guys, actually matters.
Mm-hmm.
No, it actually matters. Like, it matters more than you know. A post, as stupid as that may sound, my dad had a saying growing up. He talked to everybody. Like, he was just, he loves to talk to people.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom would get really frustrated with it. And one day she said, he told me this after she passed. She passed from a brain tumor a few years ago. And he said, Mom used to always get upset with me because I'd talk with people. Every elevator I get in, I'd turn around, I'd talk to somebody in the elevator. And he said, Mom once asked me, why do you keep talking to people? And he said, because you don't know if she's riding the elevator up there to jump off the top floor.
Mm.
And social media is that opportunity, guys. Like, I hate to say it matters that much because there's so much crap on it. But a post can matter. A podcast can matter. Like, it can't. Like truthfully, like one line. You know what I mean?
1,000%.
Like, we need to be more intentional with what we do. So I love what you're doing.
I agree with you. Thank you, man. That means a ton. And obviously, be respectful of all the studio boys. Yeah. Your time, everyone's time. Because I could talk to you forever. We'll do another part. Yeah. We'll do another part undoubtedly. No neck brace next time too. So you can be fully mobile. But Ryan, thank you so much, dude. Literally, your story's amazing. The little nuggets you have, far better than copper. They're gold for sure. And I appreciate you 100% for taking the time. Thank you, all the boys. And as always, much love to everybody listening. Until next time.
Let's go. Thanks, guys.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. As always, it was a blast for me. I hope you got something out of this. If you got something out of this video of value, share this with a friend, and please go show your love. We're on all streaming platforms, including YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. Any ratings, comments, likes, shares, they go a very long way, and they make it so I can keep doing these things for you, and I would appreciate it greatly. So please go share with a friend. Until next time.